Hey guys, tonight we begin a gentle journey through the soundscape of ancient Greece. Forget busy cities for a moment. Imagine yourself transported far away, across olive groves and sun-warmed hills, past marble temples glowing in the moonlight, right into a world where music was woven into every part of life. Let's take a slow breath together. Life in ancient Greece was much quieter than ours. No engines, no hum of electricity, no synthetic sounds. At sunrise, the air was fresh and filled with the calls of birds. As the day began, rhythms of work and song naturally intertwined. Whether you were a farmer, a merchant, or a child rinsing sleep from your eyes, music was always nearby. Every community, from Athens to tiny island villages, had its own traditions. Small children heard gentle lullabies and playful tunes sung by their mothers, often with a simple instrument, maybe a lyre, maybe just clapped hands. As you wandered the marketplace, you'd hear minstrels performing for tips, their instruments ringing over clay tiles and bustling crowds. Inside cool homes, women sang as they prepared bread, old men whistled as they repaired fishing nets or mended sandals. Music was not luxury, it was necessity. Songs helped pace the work, lift spirits, celebrate festivals, send off loved ones, and welcome guests. Ancient Greeks believed the gods themselves valued music. They envisioned Apollo delighting in melody, the muses inspiring creativity, and Dionysus lifting joy through frenzied dance. The myths they told of Orpheus charming trees and stones, of Amphion building walls with music, are more than legend. They reflect a deep faith in the power of human sound. Before we go instrument by instrument, take a moment to like this video if you truly love music, and let me know in the comments which musical instrument fascinates you the most. Picture the scene at a simple family feast. Tired after a long day, everyone gathers in the twilight, and food appears, sometimes around a fire, sometimes in a small courtyard. There might be soft talk, laughter, and as the meal grows lively, someone picks up a lyre or a pipes. The children join in, clapping or dancing. These everyday moments are where the magic of ancient instruments truly came alive, not reserved for the elite, but spread through all layers of society. Let's slow down and really imagine the soundscape. Early in the morning, the shepherd on a hillside plays a pan flute, gently encouraging his sheep along narrow paths. In the afternoon, a pair of workers in an orchard sings together, one keeping time on a stretched leather drum, the other picking out a simple melody. At dusk, you might hear the low chant of women at the well, their voices blending and echoing in the stone. In Athens and other cities, music was even more pronounced. Public spaces, the agora, the gymnasium, the theatre, were alive not only with voices, but with instruments. Young students learned lyric poetry accompanied by the lyre. Athletes trained to the rhythm of drums or pipes. Every religious festival, every procession, every gathering to honor the gods was filled with sound. Even the military had its music marching tunes to steady feet and stir courage in the heart. You can picture instruments hanging on the walls of simple homes, some made of wood, some bone, some metal, some out of gourds or shells. These were not status symbols, they were tools of daily life, inherited from parents, shared among siblings, repaired lovingly, or replaced only when truly worn out. A well-crafted lyre or kithara might be the pride of a household, passed down across generations, its body polished by hundreds of hands and years of stories. Music marked the rhythms of birth and death too. When a child was born, neighbors came with song, sometimes a group of women, sometimes just one sweet voice and a gentle drum. When someone died, laments were sung, mourners gathered to play sad, haunting tunes that seemed to belong to both the earth and the sky. In the marketplace, wandering musicians let their music float over the stalls, hoping for a coin or a crust of bread. Some played in the shade of a column, others walked, weaving through crowds. There was competition, but also camaraderie, a sense that music was for sharing, for lightening burdens as much as impressing strangers. Music was central to weddings. Before the ceremony, families would gather to sing, sometimes using a small handheld harp or percussion. During celebrations, the music grew lively, drums and pipes mingling, dancers swirling through the night, joyful notes marking new beginnings. Even politics and public matters weren't without melody. Poets performed at gatherings for leaders, weaving messages into their songs. Dramatic competitions filled theatres with music, not only accompanying but guiding the action, connecting thousands of listeners to the mythic past. Sometimes the best music was in the quietest places, a father singing softly with his son as the sun set over the sea, a lone fisherman whistling as he rode beneath the stars, the gentle strum of a lyre on a restless night, playing just for the moon and for sleepless thoughts. No matter your class, age or fortune, music found you. If you were rich, you might own several fine instruments, invite teachers, host banquets with hired players. If poor, you learned from friends or family, patched together your own simple instrument, and sang with the voice you had. Above all, music was alive. The same instrument sounded different in every home, in every hand, in every part of the city or countryside. No song was quite the same after 100 performances. Every festival, every season, every rite of passage gave birth to variations, sometimes kept as tradition, sometimes lost to the winds. Tonight, as we start slowly exploring each instrument, let's remember that music in ancient Greece was more than entertainment. It was life itself, a bridge between generations, a comfort through hardship, a way to celebrate and survive, to pray, to hope, to love, to mourn, and to dream. Before diving into the details, if you'd love a deeper exploration into daily life and music in ancient Greece, hit like so we know to make an entire video dedicated to everyday sound in the ancient world. Let's linger now on one of the most iconic musical instruments of the ancient Greek world, the lyre. Tonight, we'll unfold every detail, painting its picture slowly, weaving its history, and letting its gentle vibrations echo across time. Close your eyes and imagine the lyre not as a museum piece or an abstract word in a textbook, but as a living thing, cradled in someone's arms, warm from touch, carrying both laughter and loss through wood and string. The lyre, or lyra, was more than an instrument. It was the very symbol of Greek music. Its shape is instantly recognizable, a small, rounded body, arms rising like open wings, a yoke stretching across the top. Sometimes the arms curve gracefully, like horns or branches. Sometimes the body is boxy, sometimes sculpted. Each region, artisan, and era left its own subtle mark. Crafting a lyre in ancient Greece required patience and skill. The body was usually made from a shell or resonant wood. Tortoise shell was prized, sounding deep and mellow, but woods like cedar and sycamore were also common. The arms could be carved from the same wood, from animal horn, or shaped from bone for extra resonance. The crossbar or yoke helped hold everything steady and sometimes featured elegant decoration, geometric carvings, tiny silver inlays, symbols of luck or devotion. The real magic lay in the strings. Picture a Greek craftsman gently stretching gut, usually from sheep, sometimes ox drawing it, twisting it, and measuring each line for clarity of sound. Strings were spaced precisely, fixed with pegs or simple loops, tightened and tuned with delicate movements of the hand. Most lyres had 7 strings, but some featured 5 or 9, each one producing a soft, transparent note. The tuning, too, was part of everyday life. Lyre players trained their ears from childhood, listening intently as they adjusted each string. The pentatonic scale was common, a simplicity that gave the music a dreamy, soothing quality, but other scales and modes added variety. With every season, every festival, new tunings and melodies appeared. Think for a moment about the sound of a lyre, gentle, clear, never overwhelming. It was perfect for accompaniment, the background to poetry, the mood setter for stories, the support for singing. Lyre music wasn't meant to shout, but to carry voices, to blend like wind weaving through olive trees or gentle waves on a stony shore. Playing the lyre was intimate. The musician typically sat holding the instrument close to the body, one hand strumming or plucking the strings, the other muting, readying and guiding the pitch. Sometimes a plectrum, a small pick, often bone or ivory, was used for crisp, exact notes. Sometimes fingers alone would coax the sound. Instruction on the lyre began young. Boys and girls alike learned basic chords, simple melodies, and the art of singing in tandem. Sometimes entire families played together, teaching each other, swapping tunes, gently criticizing and praising. Passing a lyre down through generations was an act of love, a way of preserving wisdom, memory, music, and touch. Imagine an Athenian boy curling up after lessons, plucking his favorite lullaby, drifting into sleep as the notes fade. Picture an old grandfather on a quiet street, his fingers moving slowly, conjuring the songs of long-gone friends and sunlit parties. Picture a young woman by the sea, playing a tune as small birds swoop low, her music reaching out and blending with the surf. At festivals, the lyre was a bridge. Poets recited epic stories with lyre accompaniment, a tradition dating back centuries, connecting the moment to the ancient myths of Homer and Hesiod. In private gatherings, the instrument smoothed conversation, filled awkward silences, set rhythms for dance. In religious ceremonies, lyre music lifted prayers, guided processions, and marked the sacred with gentle harmony. The lyre was deeply linked to Apollo, the god of light, music, and prophecy. Temples dedicated to Apollo often echoed with the sound of lyres. Musicians wore garlands, sometimes prayed before performing, honoring both the human skill and the divine inspiration behind every song. Of course, lyre players lived within a spectrum. Some crafted new melodies, some played tried and true standards, some earned fame as virtuosos, many went unnoticed. But if you stopped anyone in the street and asked about music, chances are the lyre would be mentioned first, a sound as Greek as sunlight, as humble and essential as bread. Lyres varied from region to region. In Sparta, the lyre was considered essential training, a mark of discipline and strength. In Lesbos, homeland of Sappho, the instrument was celebrated for its lyrical beauty, paired with exquisite poetry and delicate song. In the countryside, lyres were simpler, sometimes even homemade, a shell to amplify, a pair of sticks bent for arms, and whatever strings the season provided. Repairing a lyre was a ritual. Broken strings were replaced, cracks carefully patched, decorations refreshed by skilled hands who respected the instrument's history. Many lyres outlived their owners, carrying stories from one generation to the next. Sometimes the lyre even became a tool of healing. Quiet music soothed the sick, calmed anxious minds, marked the end of a long journey, or welcomed travelers home. If you close your eyes and let the mental sound of an ancient lyre play, you'll notice it doesn't demand attention, but offers comfort. A gentle, weaving presence, always there if you need it, happy in the background, ready to become the center of the world if the song asks. Tonight, let's hold on to that gentle melody. The lyre's story continues, its shape, its sound, and its place at the heart of Greek life. Next, we'll slide slowly into the world of the kithara, another iconic string instrument with a bigger and bolder voice. But before we move on, if you dream of a whole video on the lyre, its stories, myths, and music, leave a comment and tell us. Maybe your wish will inspire an episode just for those gentle strings. Now let's move deeper into the music halls and open-air theatres of ancient Greece, shifting focus from the gentle lyre to its louder, more impressive cousin, the kithara. If the lyre was the heartbeat of daily life, the kithara was the voice of spectacle, ceremony, and professional artistry. Picture the kithara as you might see it in an ancient festival or contest, large, elegant, and commanding. Its body, wide and squared off, carved from prized woods like maple or boxwood, sometimes even decorated with ivory, silver, or gilded trims for special performances. Tall arms rise from the base, often thicker than those of the lyre, giving the instrument a sturdy, almost architectural look, meant to be seen, admired, and heard over crowds. Where the lyre was often homemade or simple, The kithara was built for power, more resonance, greater volume, and a gravitas that made it the instrument of choice for virtuosos, poets, and singers who performed before packed audiences. Strings, usually 7 but sometimes more, were spaced for clarity and tension. With each careful twist of the tuning pegs, the instrument came alive, bright, reverberant, ready to fill vast spaces with bold, ringing notes. The kithara, more than any other instrument, was tied to public performance. You'd find it at musical competitions during festivals, at dramatic presentations in the grand theatres, and at official ceremonies honouring athletic victors, poets, or visiting dignitaries. Kithara players weren't just musicians, they were artists in the classical sense, members of professional guilds, sometimes travelling from city to city, seeking fame in the eyes of spectators and judges alike. Playing the kithara demanded skill and confidence. The instrument was heavy and awkward to hold, requiring a strap or special posture. Musicians developed strong hands, agile fingers, and a precise sense of rhythm. They used a large plectrum, often cut from horn or ivory, for powerful strumming, and their fingers danced across the strings for delicate flourishes, complex harmonies, and lightning-fast transitions. Lessons for kithara began with basics: how to tune, how to sit or stand, how to move fingers without losing control. As students improved, they learned classical pieces from ancient masters, hymn fragments, ceremonial marches, intricate accompaniments for poetic recitation. The reputation of the kithara player was distinct from that of the modest lyre player. Kithara musicians wore special robes, sometimes bright, sometimes dark, sometimes adorned with emblems of Apollo. In some cities they were treated with deep respect, in others they were seen as rivals, forceful personalities who dared to challenge the poetic and musical status quo. In temples, the kithara marked high festivals. Priests and priestesses, singers and dancers, all performed with kithara accompaniment. The instrument's powerful voice united processions, led choirs, and struck awe into congregations. Songs praising gods and heroes echoed through the marble halls and open plazas, rising above incense smoke and crowds of worshippers. The kithara also thrived in Greek drama. When playwrights like Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus staged their works, the musical component was essential. Choruses sang to the rhythm of kithara and drum. Sorrowful scenes were underscored by its lower notes. Comedic moments danced on the upper strings. The audience learned to anticipate emotional turns through shifts in music, guided and cued by the expertise of master performers. Kithara competitions were legendary for their drama. Musicians trained for months, perfecting technique, memorizing epic passages, sometimes debuting original compositions. Contest rules varied across festivals. Some judged solo performances, others group ensembles. In Athens, a victory in the Panathenaic or Dionysian festivals could make a musician's reputation for life-winning coins, wreaths, perhaps even a statue in the public square. Yet despite the glamour, kithara players knew hardship. Instruments needed constant maintenance. Competition was fierce, fame was fleeting, and one poor performance could sink a career overnight. Judges were merciless, public tastes changed, and professional envy was common. Behind closed doors, the kithara was a teaching tool as well as a public symbol. Poets and orators honed their vocal power with its accompaniment. Families with means hired private tutors, hoping their children might one day win a contest or impress guests with a brilliant solo. For many ordinary people, however, the kithara remained an aspiration, something to watch and admire, a dream too costly to touch. Greek artists celebrated the kithara in sculpture and vase painting. You can find images of Apollo playing it with serene concentration, young men and women in festival garb strumming it beneath olive trees, older teachers walking with students, the instrument slung over their shoulder like a badge of honor. Materials for kithara were carefully selected. Artisans paid attention to every piece: wood, horn, string, glue, with traditions handed down for generations. Some kitharas carried animal motifs, protective carvings, or words of prayer. Others were austere, simple, built for strength and clarity rather than show. Over time, the sound of the kithara marked every great Greek celebration. From the crowded amphitheaters of Athens to quiet spring nights in Delphi, its voice soared, part of every victory, every rite, every heartbreak and joy expressed in melody. So next time you picture ancient Greek music, let your imagination unfold slowly, not just gentle lyres in quiet homes, but kitharas blazing in the open air, their strings shimmering in sunlight, their notes echoing across marble and centuries. If you'd enjoy a full episode deep diving into the world of kithara, its construction, master players, legendary competitions, hit subscribe so you'll catch every journey into ancient artistry. Let's move gently through the world of ancient Greek wind instruments. If stringed instruments like the lyre and kithara were the hands and heart of Greek music, wind instruments spoke with the breath, the invisible current that could whisper, wail, enchant, or thunder across fields and city squares. Tonight, we begin with the aulos, an instrument as old as Greek myth itself, surrounded by stories, rituals, passions, and a little controversy. The aulos was, in simplest terms, a double pipe. Imagine two slender tubes, sometimes made from reed, bone, wood, or even rare metals, played together, each held between the lips with fingers controlling a series of holes along their length. But the aulos was no ordinary flute. Its mouthpiece often included a tiny reed, creating a sound that could be sweet and haunting or bright and penetrating. Skilled players called autheks trained for years to master breath control, fingering, embouchure, the subtle art of shaping the lips and air to find just the right timbre. To picture the aulos in action, think of a festival morning. Crowds gather around a marble temple. A priest raises his hands and the aulos sings, startling, relentless, rhythmic, propelling processions, echoing off stone walls, guiding steps and prayers. Its music was essential for rituals, marking sacred time, connecting mortals and gods, bringing order or frenzy as required. But the aulos was also the companion of dances. In private parties or large festivals, dancers moved in circles or lines, following the rhythm and melodies of the Alcides. The instrument could lead battle marches, sharpen competitions during athletic games, and, at times, help summon altered emotional states, a trance, a mourning, a celebration. Some said its sound could inspire ecstasy, even madness. Dionysian cults prized it for its power to break boundaries and unleash the wild. There were different types of aulos. The forminx, an elegant version for delicate scenes, and the bombex, much louder for outdoor events. Mouth straps called forbeia were sometimes worn to help the player hold and stabilize the pipes, allowing for greater force, longer playing, and more dramatic sound. Learning the aulos was not for the faint-hearted. Breathwork was everything, the ability to keep both pipes sounding together, balancing tone, pitch, and volume for hours at a stretch. Aulos sometimes trained their lungs by swimming, running, or even reciting poetry in one long breath. Their fingers grew clever and agile, darting over hold and key, moulding melody from air and bone. Auls drifted through many worlds. Some were respected professionals, honoured in temples or athletic competitions. Others played at markets, taverns, or wandered like buskers, searching for coin, food, or a place to sleep. The best became legends, sought after at every major city event. And yet, the aulos was not without controversy. Philosophers and poets sometimes argued about its value. Plato admired the lyre for its pure tones, but frowned on the aulos, calling it too wild, too prone to stirring bass emotions. Others disagreed, praising its ability to unite crowds, inspire poetry, and move warriors to courage before battle. When you picture the Greek city, hear the hum of the aulos weaving through daily life, in the theatre, underscoring drama, in rituals, beckoning spirits or praising gods, in homes, guiding private dances and celebrations. Sometimes its sound was gentle, drifting soft as the morning, other times sharp and commanding, loud as a trumpet's call. Speaking of trumpets, the salpinx was another wind instrument, metallic and brash, used mainly in war. Long, straight tubes crafted from bronze or silver, sometimes almost a meter in length. Their call could signal formations, frighten enemies, celebrate victories, or summon order in chaos. But let's linger a little longer with the pan flute, the syrinx, the soft counterpoint to the drama of the aulos. Legend says it was invented by Pan, the mysterious forest god who fused man and goat, joy and mischief. Pan fell in love with the nymph Syrinx, who transformed herself into reeds to escape him. Desolate, Pan cut and bound the reeds together, and the first pan flute was born. Imagine a shepherd on a hillside at dusk, leaning against a rock and playing a simple tune on his syrinx. The sound is airy, delicate, a gentle series of notes that ripple and fade, echoing off stones and low valleys. Children ran to listen, animals stirred curiously, sometimes birds joined in, answering the notes. The syrinx was portable, humble, and beloved in the countryside for its ease and charm. Each flute was unique, a handful of reeds hollowed and cut to size, bound with cord or wax. Some were decorated with leather, beads, or painted with tiny symbols. The player blew across the open tops, shifting lips and pressure to change the pitch, sometimes moving the entire instrument or just one finger to adjust the notes. In myth and poetry, the sound of the syrinx was linked to tranquility, nostalgia, rural beauty. No large festival or temple ceremony, perhaps, but countless private moments, picnics, gentle evenings, lovers wandering far from the crowds. For some, the pan flute was a companion for travel, easy to carry, hard to break, reliable through months of wandering. Urban dwellers sometimes looked down on it as lowly, but everyone recognized its power to soothe, amuse, and fill the air with wonder. Wind instruments in ancient Greece weren't just about performance, they were bridges between world and self. Whether in swirling ritual or quiet solitude, their notes hung soft or fierce in the air, conjuring feelings beyond words. So, next time you imagine music in ancient Greece, remember the breath as much as the hand picture. Two pipes singing wild in the temple, a trumpet ringing through the battle line, or the quiet voice of a pan flute trailing through olive groves at sunset. Let's unwind another layer of sound in ancient Greece, slowing down and settling into the heartbeats of the world, percussion. Greek music was not just strings and breath, but the steady thrum and shimmer and clatter that kept ceremonies alive, marked the passage of time, and brought people together in work, worship, and play. Start with the drum, the tympanon. This wasn't a standardized instrument like our modern snare or bass, but a family of timekeepers used in festivals, rituals, and even healing ceremonies. The most common was a shallow frame drum, sometimes round, sometimes oval, a wooden hoop stretched with taut animal skin, often goat or sheep. Building a drum was intimate work. The frame needed to be even and flexible. Too thick, and it lost its voice. Too thin, and it would warp in damp or heat. The skins were carefully scraped, soaked, and attached with leather thongs or glue so that every part could resonate equally. Tympanons were played with the fingers, palm, or a soft beater. Think of a priestess or celebrant at a Dionysian festival, marking rhythm for ecstatic dances. The beat might be slow and deep for mystery rites, then wild and fast as the celebration climbed toward its frenzy. Drums marked transitions. They called crowds to order, signaled the start of athletic contests, and punctuated stories around the fire. Ancient Greek healers even used drum beats in therapy, believing the vibration could restore balance, chase away illness, and reconnect body and soul. Percussion blended into daily work. Workers sometimes sang or called time with rhythm, using simple hand claps or banging on nearby surfaces. In moments of celebration, children and adults would join in, clapping, stamping, or tapping on whatever came to hand. Music and movement were always linked. Now picture the cymbals, called kimbala. These small, round discs of bronze or copper, sometimes the size of a palm, sometimes larger, were struck together for a piercing, resonant chime. Temple processions shimmered with their sound. Dancers used them to punctuate steps or signal changes in tempo. With every clash, the air shivered. It was more than noise. It was a call to attention, a signal that something sacred or joyful was unfolding. Cymbals accompanied the loudest celebrations, but they also carried ritual significance. In certain rites, their ringing was believed to drive away dark spirits, cleanse spaces, and awaken crowds to the presence of the divine. Some musicians added small kimbalas to their drums, varying the music with every strike and shimmer. Let's linger a moment on rattles, sistron, crotalon, and their cousins. The sistron, originally Egyptian but beloved in Greece too, was a handle of metal or wood with rings or loops that shook and danced with every movement. Priests and dancers used them to awaken sleep, stir spirits, or simply add texture to melody and rhythm. Crotala was simpler. Sticks or clappers made from wood, bone, or even strong reeds clicked together in time. Imagine a group of children chasing through a village square, keeping time with crotala as drums rolled and pan flutes soared overhead. These instruments were playful, but also serious. They marked key moments in ritual, storytelling, and drama. In theatre, percussion set the stage. It marked entrances, built suspense, and heightened emotion as actors spoke or sang. Playwrights sometimes specified different types of sound-booming drums for the gods, sharp cymbals for conflict, gentle rattles for moments of mystery or revelation. Percussion also played a key role in funerals and mourning. Slow drum beats matched laments, cymbals sounded the passage from life to death, and rattles helped guide souls on the final journey. In birth celebrations, the same instruments welcomed new life, praising the gods and connecting family to community. No two sets of percussion tools were alike. Wealthy patrons sometimes had decorated drums and cymbals, cut from rare metals, carved with mythic scenes. Poor musicians and villagers made do with whatever was at hand, strong reeds, old pots and pans that could sing for a night. Rhythm was communal. It united strangers during celebrations, helped the lonely pass their time, let everyone join in music regardless of skill or status. Drums, cymbals, and rattles asked only that you listen and move, a contrast to the complexity of lyres or aulos that required years of learning. Imagine the soundscape again, the deep pulsing drum echoing across a valley, the sharp clash of cymbals as a parade winds through narrow streets at sunset, the whispering rattle guiding dancers into a trance. Percussion shaped the flow of ancient Greek life, marking joy and sorrow, day and night, homecoming and farewell. In the country, drums summoned people to gather. In the city, cymbals called out the sacred. Even the humblest rattle, played by a child or an old woman at a fireside, became a thread that connected voices in the dark. Behind every beat was a story. Sometimes the drums told of stormy weather or coming battle, cymbals foretold good news or warned of tricks, rattles smiled with simple pleasure. Musicians passed down tricks of timing, favorite patterns, secret meanings, rhythms that said more than words. If you'd love a whole video dedicated to the unsung world of ancient percussion, their miracles, magic, and the stories their rhythms told, drop a comment and inspire the next deep dive. Let's travel further into the soundscape, leaving behind the familiar comfort of lyres, kitharas, aulos, and drums, and moving into the intriguing world of rare and exotic instruments, the ones that may have sounded strange even to an ancient Greek ear. Begin with the salpinx, the ancient Greek trumpet. Unlike the gentle tones of string and wind instruments, the salpinx demanded attention. Visualize it, a long, straight tube, usually made of bronze, sometimes silver, sometimes adorned with ivory or bone tips. No gentle curves here, just a simple, elongated form built for utility and clarity. The trumpet's sound was raw and powerful, a piercing blast intended not for subtlety, but for urgency. In a world without electronic amplifiers, the salpinx was the equivalent of a megaphone. Its primary job was communication in crowded, noisy environments, on battlefields, in city assemblies, at athletic competitions. A signal from the salpinx could call hoplites into formation, announce the start of Olympic Games, summon crowds to civic assemblies, or mark the arrival of dignitaries. Unlike the lyre or kithara, the salpinx wasn't built for extended melody. Its call was brief, direct, almost elemental. Most players trained with the breath of athletes, building strength and stamina to project the trumpet's unmistakable sound across distance and chaos. There was artistry involved, controlling the volume, varying the pitch, shaping the call for different contexts, but the instrument was mostly utilitarian, a voice of leadership, caution, celebration, command. Still, trumpets had their place in ceremony. At funerals for famous generals or civic heroes, a slow, mournful salpinx might mark the procession. In the theatre, it could cue dramatic entrances or heighten tension, its voice, metallic and sharp, cutting through the soft hum of bodies and conversation. Some city ceremonies even featured contests among trumpet players, testing endurance and precision. Let's drift gently to the harp or anjon, the Greek harp. Brought, in part, from Egypt and the ancient Near East, the harp was a rare sight in mainland Greece, but its legend and gentle resonance captured imaginations wherever it appeared. Picture a graceful, upright frame, wood bent into gentle arches with strings running vertically, plucked by fingers that sang with clarity or shimmered with quietude. The harp's sound was delicate and beautiful, ideal for small gatherings, gentle solos, and ceremonial moments where song needed to cast a peaceful spell. Its construction was art. The wood must be flexible yet strong, the strings tuned with exquisite care, and the design elegant, not only heard but admired visually too. Harpists were sometimes foreigners, travelers, or Greeks who had learned from distant tutors in cities like Memphis, Sidon, or Jerusalem. Their music was tinged with mystery-strange scales, unfamiliar tunings, melodic patterns rare in the bustling agora or Greek theatre. A harp could conjure silence better than almost any other instrument, its tones drifting like wind over water, inviting listeners to close their eyes and lose themselves. It was said that Orpheus played an instrument akin to a harp when he descended to the underworld and charmed Hades and Persephone. In some stories, heroes and poets played harps to tame animals, soothe spirits, or summon kindly gods. Whether fact or fantasy, the image of the harp endured as a symbol of deep magic in Greek memory. Now, the most enigmatic, the aulos, Greek bagpipes. Yes, bagpipes, long before Scotland became synonymous with their wheezing cry. Aulos were rare and mostly used in rural regions or at rustic celebrations, but they added a unique voice to the Greek musical palette. Picture a dried animal skin, goat or sheep tied off at the ends, filled with breath and attached to one or more reed pipes. The player would blow air into the skin, then squeeze the bag under their arm, pushing air through the reeds to create a drone and melody simultaneously. The sound could be playful, sometimes shrill, sometimes mellow, depending on the pipes and reeds chosen. Bagpipes were perfect for outdoor gatherings, processions before the harvest, village feasts, long dances that carried on into the night. Their continuous sound provided a backdrop that let other musicians improvise or dancers move without pause. For the urban elite, bagpipes were considered rustic or even uncultivated, but in the countryside, they were loved for their joyfulness and versatility. The builder of bagpipes was often a jack-of-all-trades, using leftover animal skins, reeds cut from the riverbank, and whatever bits of wood or bone available. The instrument wasn't elegant and the tone wasn't subtle, but their spirit was contagious, spreading laughter, energy, and camaraderie through even the smallest village square. Let's add still more colour with small, rare instruments, shell trumpets, conch horns that called fishermen from the water, jaw harps, crafted from bronze, clanging gently between teeth, whistles and ocarinas, made from clay or bone, used for games or gentle music in children's hands. These uncommon tools remind us not all Greek music was for the city or the gods. Much of it belonged to the countryside, the edge of the festival, the hidden pocket of a shepherd's tunic, the laughter around a campfire. In some places, musicians innovated. New instruments arrived with traders or travelers, African thumb pianos, Persian lutes, Phoenician cymbals, all absorbed, adapted, and occasionally passed down. Music never stood still, it migrated, morphed, mixed with the spirit and curiosity of every listener. Think of that quiet moment as dusk falls over a Greek village, with 3 or 4 musicians sharing ancient and strange sounds. The sharp call of the salpinx, the distant ethereal harp, the throbbing bagpipe, the delicate tremble of a shell trumpet. each sound different, each carving out its own lane in the ancient night. Acoustics matter. These instruments sounded new in every locale, echoes bouncing off marble in the city, carried and blurred by trees and hills in the countryside. Musicians learned to tune and play not just to the demands of technique, but to the mood of space, adapting, shaping each note for the present moment. In stories and myths, the rare instruments often appear near turning points, heroic entries, revelations in drama, moments of ritual transformation. The sound of the unfamiliar could announce change, both musical and spiritual. Not everyone loved the rare instruments. The conservative city dwellers could be skeptical, viewing them as noisy or foreign, but for the rest, their variety added richness, proof that Greek music, though grounded in tradition, was always curious, always open to new voices. So, as our journey through ancient Greek music continues, let the rare instruments remind you some beauty comes only in small doses, some in joyous bursts, some in echoes that linger long after the last note dies away. Whenever you imagine ancient Greece, remember not just the familiar lyre or aulos, but those wild, beautiful oddities, the bold call of the trumpet, the liquid shimmer of the harp, and the playful wheeze of bagpipes, keeping watch over centuries of laughter, ritual, and sleep. Tonight, let's step even closer, letting our imagination run along the surfaces, shapes, and intimate realities of Greek musical instruments, the way they were touched, seen, smelled, cherished, and remembered through long years and many lives. Imagine entering a simple Greek home at sunrise. The air is cool, filled with the scent of olive oil, sun-warmed clay, and drying herbs. In the corner, instruments rest against a wall, a lyre carved from smooth wood, its edges burnished by years of hands, a flute, pale and lightweight, faintly sweet with the aroma of river reeds, a drum, its leather taut, giving off the subtle musk of animal hide. Music in ancient Greece was deeply sensory. Instruments were not merely objects for producing sound, they were meant to be touched, held, admired with the eyes as much as with the ears. Let's take a slow walk through these sensations, lingering on each detail. The lyre, for example, was a delight for the hands. Before each performance, players ran their fingers along its arms and yoke, quietly checking for cracks or splinters, feeling the grain of the wood. Each mark held a memory, a bruise from last year's festival, a smooth patch from family lessons by firelight. Plucking a string created not only a note, but a small vibration in the body of the instrument, rippling under the player's palm. A well-loved lyre felt alive, the wood expanding and contracting with the seasons, the strings changing texture based on heat or humidity. Musicians sometimes slept with their lyres nearby, the instrument kept in warm places to avoid damage, wrapped in cloth so its voice would remain gentle and clear. The kithara, larger and heavier, demanded strong arms and a careful grip. Lifting it for rehearsal was an act of purpose. Tracing the inlaid patterns on its frame was like reading the instrument's biography. A swirl of ivory, a faded line of old paint, a chip from hurried travel along stony roads. Its strings sang louder, their tension a living force in the hands. Wind instruments, the aulos, the pan flute, brought a sensation of breath, moisture, pressure. Players moistened reeds, gently forming them to suit their lips and lungs. Blowing into a pipe filled the mouth with the distinctive taste of wood, reed, sometimes faintly salty from hands or water. Each aulos was shaped for its owner's fingers, sometimes customized over years, the holes worn smooth, the mouthpiece darkened by thousands of careful touches. Holding a pan flute was a simple pleasure. Smooth tubes bound together, cool to the touch in the morning, slightly warmed by the fireside at night. Musicians would tap the ends gently, feeling for cracks, testing the airflow with their breath. When played, the syrinx vibrated in the player's bones. The music resonated not just out into the world, but inside the one who played it. Percussion instruments, drums, cymbals, rattles, were more tactile still. Drummers ran their hands along skins, feeling for spots that rang brighter or deeper. Each drum had a sweet spot, a place where the vibrations traveled cleanly across the frame. Cymbals flashed in the sunlight, their metal cold and heavy, sometimes rough with handmade hammer marks, sometimes polished until you could catch glimpses of your own reflection. Rattles and clappers were playful handles spun, stones shook and clicked, the rhythm moved from hand to elbow, from dancer to listener, echoing in the ears and bouncing on the soles of bare feet. Every festival, every party was alive with these sounds, each note a tiny burst of movement and joy. Even the rare instruments carried secrets. Trumpets cold and smooth, smelling faintly of metal and old oil, harps soft and silken, their wood darkening with age, the strings sometimes giving way with a sharp, surprising snap. Instrument construction was itself a feast for the senses. Craftsmen chose materials by touch and smell, smelling the wood, bending it, tapping to hear its voice. Gut strings were tested for elasticity, sometimes chewed slightly by the craftsperson to judge thickness. Animal skins for drums were selected not just for appearance, but for the way they felt under gentle pressure. Decoration added another layer. Some instruments bore carvings, swirls, vines, mythic creatures etched by loving hands. Others had inlays, bits of coloured stone, tiny drops of silver, fragments of glass or shell. Wealthy owners might commission elaborate scenes, Apollo with his lyre, Pan piping to nymphs, athletes dancing in competition. Each image invited the eyes to linger, the mind to wander. Maintenance was a ritual. Musicians polished wood with oil, wrapped strings to prevent cracking, replaced reeds and skins with care, sometimes singing to themselves as they worked, believing that the instrument responded better to gentle attention. Broken instruments weren't discarded quickly. Even those no longer playable became objects of memory, displayed or hidden away as a family heirloom. Playing instruments shaped posture, movement, and sometimes even personality. Lyre players developed quiet confidence and steady hands. Aulos trained deep breaths, quick fingers, drummers strong arms and wild gestures, harpers gentle, precise touch. The practice left physical marks, calluses, muscled wrists, occasionally unusual gait. Sound was the final sense, and the most fleeting music heard and then gone. But the body remembered. Musicians described a good instrument as not just one that sounded beautiful, but one that fit them, responding to their touch, their pressure, their mood. It was a partnership, both player and tool shaping the song. In memory, these sensory details lingered. Old men recalled the itch of a new lyre's varnish. Women spoke fondly of the cool, round feel of a favourite flute. Children remembered the tickle of cymbals against their arms during festival dances. The sounds and the sensations remained, years after the instruments were lost. Even those who didn't play still shared in these rituals. Passing an instrument at a party, letting a guest stroke the polished wood, listening to a child tap out rhythms on a borrowed drum. These acts connected the community in small, dense webs of touch and memory. If you imagine ancient Greece now, try to picture not only the music, but the tangible, physical world, the smell of wood smoke and fresh clay, the gleam of strings in candlelight, the embrace of an instrument after a long walk home. Let your senses drift gently, and let yourself find rest in the quiet pulse and echo of those ancient, beautiful tools. Let's settle in under the endless stars and dive into the stories that swirl around musical instruments in ancient Greece. Tales of myth and history, legendary performances, tiny scenes from daily life, all woven together by music's quiet power. Start with the gods. Greeks believed music was divine. Apollo, the god of light and prophecy, was always pictured with his golden lyre, a symbol not just of beauty but of harmony, balance, and celestial order. Myth tells that Apollo won his lyre from Hermes, the clever trickster, who invented it by stretching strings across a tortoise shell. This tiny exchange set in motion 1,000 years of legend. Every time a Greek played, they honored Apollo's gentle mastery. Then there's Orpheus, the poet whose music could charm birds and trees, calm wild beasts, and, most famously, descend to the underworld itself. Armed only with his lyre and an unbreakable heart, Orpheus sang so sweetly that Hades and Persephone were moved to mercy, briefly letting him reclaim his beloved Eurydice. That story turned the lyre into a tool of magic and hope, a way of facing sorrow head-on. Follow music into the world of festivals. Imagine crowded amphitheaters, sunlight streaming down, people packed on stone benches. A single kithara rings out, its bold notes slicing through the buzz. The audience quiets. A poet steps forward, reciting lines with deep emotion, every verse painted in rhythm and chord. Contest judges lean in, faces tense, as young performers compete for glory. Sometimes in music, sometimes in poetry set to music, sometimes in complex displays mixing both. Some musicians achieved fame. Their names echo through history. Terpander of Lesbos, a master of new scales and forms, Timotheus of Miletus, celebrated for daring innovations, Anacreon, who sang of love and wine. Winning at the Panathenaic or Pythian Games meant more than money. It was a gateway to honor, patronage, occasionally lasting legacy. But for every legend, thousands of musicians simply played for the joy and need of it. Watch a scene unfold in a village. It's harvest time, and the air is sharp with cinnamon and hay. Neighbors gather as dusk falls, a drum is tapped, a simple flute joins, and before you know it, dancers spin between lanterns, old songs shared so many times that even the youngest know the steps. Someone plucks a lyre, gently at first, then louder, calling voices into harmony. The music isn't perfect, but the feeling is warmth, shared effort, the relief of harvest complete, and the promise of rest. Now step into an Athenian home on a cold winter night. The family sits close to the fire, telling stories as wind rattles the shutters. One child is learning their first tune, struggling a little, making everyone smile. The father takes his battered flute and plays along, sometimes missing a note, sometimes playing so sweetly everyone forgets the cold for a moment. Festival processions overflow with sound. Owlstes fill the streets with rhythmic, unhesitating melody, while cymbals flash and drums roll. Young people carry rattles, pairs of dancers match steps to beats, priests call out sacred words, and music lets those words linger long after the festival fades. Warriors, too, marched to music. Trumpets called them to order, pipes set pace as feet pounded the earth, lyres sang before battle to summon courage or after to mourn the fallen. In return, victorious athletes were honored with song. Some composed hundreds of lines just to celebrate a single win. Occasionally, music changed lives. A skilled musician might be invited to court, gifted fine tools, or, rarely, lands of their own. Others found love through song suitors serenading with gentle strings or playful dances, couples marking their union by singing beneath new stars. Music carried grief as faithfully as joy. Funeral processions were marked by slow, deep notes. Laments were sung, offering comfort to the mourning, binding the community in shared loss. Rituals, birth, coming of age, wedding, funeral, were never complete without sound. The same instrument might be heard 100 times across a lifetime, voice changing, memory deepening, meaning growing from one event to the next. Musicians learned and passed down their craft as a living tradition. Methods weren't always written. Skills were given through demonstration, repetition, gentle correction, and the simple urgency of play until you get it right. Many families had special songs or favored rhythms, secrets of technique known only to those who practiced together in the quiet of home. Some players were famous for a particular flourish or style. They became known by their city and sound as much as their name. Not all stories were happy. Musicians sometimes faced scorn, jealous rivals, harsh judges, indifferent crowds. Sometimes performances failed, strings broke, voices cracked, nerves betrayed even the best. Yet even in disappointment, music gave meaning. A lesson in resilience, humility, the beauty of trying again. Children grew up marked by sound. They heard lullabies sung to the gentle pluck of a lyre, learned counting rhythms with clappers, laughed as pipes called birds into the courtyard. The body remembered years later a tune heard on the road could bring back lost summers, happy faces, the safety of home. Greek instruments became metaphors in the wider world. Poets wrote that society itself was like music, needing harmony, rhythm, creative tension. Leaders saw the discipline of a music contest as training for rule, the flexibility of improvisation as guidance through crisis. Music was sometimes a way to cross boundaries. Travelers and strangers, foreigners from Anatolia, Egypt, Phoenicia, shared songs and tools, inventing new hybrids for feasts and festivals. Music softened differences, sparked curiosity, helped people find common ground even in a world often divided by politics and pride. As centuries passed, the faces, voices, and hands changed, but the instruments themselves endured. Fragments of old lyres and kitharas are still found today, buried in ruins, remembered in painted pottery, sung about in lines of poetry. Their shapes and sounds continue to inspire makers, dreamers, storytellers. So, as you drift into sleep tonight, let yourself be carried by these echoes. Imagine the gentle strike of a drum, the shimmer of a cymbal, the airy notes of a flute as the stars blink over distant hills. All around, stories wrap you, legends, performances, everyday moments where music made life richer, sweeter, deeper, and more bearable. Let's quiet the world around us and sink gently into the heart of ancient Greek music, not just as sound, but as feeling, memory, and living spirit. All those instruments, lyres, kitharas, flutes, drums, trumpets, harps, were more than wood, string, bone, or metal. They carried emotions, beliefs, and the invisible ties that bound people together across generations. Music in ancient Greece was intimate. Picture a solitary figure in a moonlit garden, fingers drifting along lyre strings, shaping a quiet tune that says more than words ever could. Or a mother in a shadowed bedroom singing with a drum at her child's bedside, her voice low and sweet, the notes a bridge to peaceful dreams. These moments were common, repeated endlessly until they became invisible threads in the fabric of daily life. At its core, Greek music was about connection. The idea wasn't to impress, but to anchor, to hold family close, to mark the turning of seasons, to soothe anxiety, to offer joy or courage when needed. Every instrument was tuned to emotion as much as to pitch. Let's linger in the ancient city during a festival. Crowds move from street to square, laughter curling in the air. Trumpets call order, flutes and panpipes send joyous melodies drifting from market to temple. Dancers circle drums, and everywhere notes float on breezes. To a Greek, these sounds were more than background. They were signals, reminders of belonging, the promise of shared celebration and safety. During sacred rituals, music unlocked doors between worlds. Soft lyre tunes guided prayers to Apollo, aulos melodies ushered worshippers into sacred trance, drums set the pace for offerings and processions. Each note was layered with meaning, prayers for good harvest, thanks for safe journeys, laments for lost loved ones. In times of sorrow, music was a healer. Families gathered after funerals, plucking strings and singing laments until pain softened a little and memory became bearable. For the anxious before battle or the weary at day's end, music settled nerves, steadied hearts. Music coloured every stage of life. At birth, instruments welcomed the new soul, gentle drumming, sweet flute tunes danced beside cradles. Children grew up listening, learning and contributing, first tapping simple beats, then shaping tunes that reflected the moods of home. Coming-of-age celebrations were marked by special songs, performed by friends and family to mark change and hope. Marriage was another turning point, and music guided every step. Processional tunes led bride and groom, kithara solos filled the air with light, drums and pipes turned feasts into dances. Even in separation, when one left for distant wars or journeys, music marked farewells, carried promises, kept love alive over miles. Think of the way music lingered in memory, A particular rhythm echoed a grandmother's lullaby, a flute tune sparked memories of festivals long past, a drum beat recalled a night when laughter lasted until sunrise. The body and mind stored these sounds like secrets, ready to return at midnight or in distant rooms or years later when all else seemed lost. Music was woven into friendship, too. Friends sang together during slow walks, invented tunes for private jokes, or played quietly on lonely evenings. Enemies, sometimes, could be softened or silenced by a particularly beautiful performance, turning discord into reluctant admiration. Artisans who built instruments poured emotion into their work. They chose wood not just for strength but for the memory of old forests, the gift of helpful trees, the lessons passed down by a teacher with gentle hands. String makers twisted gut thinking of the animals that gave, the years spent perfecting size and stretch. Even tool-worn instruments, scratched, bent, patched, were valued deeply, carrying their own story in every mark. Great musicians understood that music's true power lay beyond skill. It was the ability to listen, to shape sound, to fit the space, the time, the people present. To improvise with feeling, to choose silence as wisely as song, to sense when a single note was enough or when a thunder of rhythm could stir a crowd to joy. Music was also a teaching tool. Elders taught children their history not only through words, but through song. Village storytellers recited genealogies in verse, setting memory to rhythm and allowing even the youngest or least attentive to absorb what was important. Even in sleep, music played a role. Some believed that quiet strumming, gentle pipes, soft percussion-guided dreams, ushering the listener into rest, helping chase away nightmares, drawing kind spirits near. And as time passed, instruments took on a life of their own. A favorite kithara was buried with its owner, a flute passed from parent to child until its holes wore smooth, a drum left in a sacred place to mark the passage of an era. Archaeologists still find these tools, pull them from the earth, and marvel at the care, the devotion, the memory locked inside. For the Greeks, music was not separate from life, but its ongoing breath. An everyday miracle, a quiet comfort, a shared inheritance, a gift from gods and ancestors. So tonight, let your mind drift in this soft echo. Whether your instrument is real or imagined, let it carry you to distant hills, festival crowds, shadowy homes, and quiet gardens where gentle souls shaped time with every note. Let's drift into the big picture now, the role of musical instruments and sound in shaping ancient Greek identity. We'll move slowly, examining how every lyre, aulos, kithara, and drum helped stitch together a world of cities, villages, generations, and hearts. Music was one of Greece's great bridges. In a land famous for division, hundreds of fiercely independent city-states, diverse dialects, rival customs, sound was a common thread. Step into Athens, Sparta, Corinth, or Rhodes, and you'd hear different songs and instruments. But beneath those variations, everyone recognized the language of melody, rhythm, and harmony. Festivals were the heartbeat of Greek unity. Each city hosted its own, but the Pan-Hellenic Games, Olympia, Delphi, Nemea, drew crowds from every region. Athletes, poets, merchants, storytellers, and musicians all made the journey. Here, the finest instruments met. The most resonant lyres, the purest kitharas, the most elaborate trumpets, drums, and pipes. At these gatherings, contests in music were civic rituals, ways of declaring hope, pride, and the shared values that defined Greek life. Victorious players became symbols of their city's grace and genius. A kithara champion from Thebes might return home and inspire a generation. A flute virtuoso from Samos might become a household name, her style borrowed and modified by her neighbors. Religious ceremonies bound people together in song. Whether in sprawling temples or tiny shrines, music marked worship as communal. Priests and priestesses led choirs, processions wound through busy streets, whole communities joined in hymns with instruments echoing the prayers. Some tunes and rhythms were considered so holy that to forget them would be to lose a piece of your heritage. Theatre amplified this unity. The chorus, an essential part of Greek drama, was both voice and instrument for civic values, history, and myth. Whether tragedy or comedy, actors relied on music to bring emotion forward, to make lessons live within hearts. Large spectacles in Athens could fill the city with melody, drawing citizens and strangers alike into a shared story. Even the Greek language used musical terms as metaphors: harmony for good order, rhythm for a well-run household, discord for civil strife, a chorus for the act of speaking together. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle wrote at length about the link between music and virtue. They argued that well-crafted sounds shaped good people, wise cities, and a better future. At home, music was a form of memory and unity. Generations gathered and shared songs, wedding melodies were taught from grandmother to granddaughter, battle tunes linked young men to ancestors. Even as borders, laws, and loyalties shifted, the instruments remained. A family might migrate from one region to another, but they carried their lyre or flute and their favorite tunes, preserving something permanent amid all change. Music crossed boundaries of class and status. While the wealthy owned the finest instruments and hosted glamorous feasts, the poor invented, repaired, and played with ingenuity and care. In every market and festival, in every home and field, music erased some of the sharpest edges. Street performers entertained elites and farmers alike. Temple musicians united strangers for prayer. Sounds also marked moments of peace and conflict. After battles, laments brought survivors together for healing. During festivals, joyful dances connected rivals and former enemies. Even in political assembly, sometimes noisy and divided, musical signals called for unity, marked the start and end of debate, or simply offered a moment's calm between arguments. Music, too, was a bridge between generations. Young children played instruments as toys, practiced beside elders, learned old tunes and invented new ones. An old flute might be battered but cherished, its voice a link to family stories and to the memory of lost loved ones. The craft of building instruments blended communities as well. Workshops drew smiths, woodworkers, priests, and artists. Families came together to harvest reeds, carve drums, string lyres, sharing stories as their hands shaped tools for the coming year. Even outsiders found shared ground through music. Travelers from Phoenicia, Egypt, Lydia, and Rome brought instruments and styles that were first odd or suspect, but soon beloved. Greeks were proud of their traditions but curious too, willing to try new sounds, new rhythms to expand their sense of beauty. When disaster struck, a bad harvest, a lost battle, a temple fire, music helped people mourn and rebuild, holding on to hope, marking solemn moments but also promising renewal. In the face of uncertainty, the familiar sound of a gently plucked lyre or an evening song in the open air reminded Greeks of their resilience and their capacity for joy. As centuries passed, Greek music changed, absorbed influences from far and wide, but the connection between instrument, heart, and community remained. The humblest tune, the softest rhythm, the gentlest touch on strings or wood or bronze, all became part of what it meant to belong. So tonight, when you listen to the echoes of ancient music in your mind, let them bind you softly to the world, remind you of shared hopes, the comfort of melody in the dark, and the unity that comes when voices and sounds embrace. Picture the first soft rays of dawn washing over ruins. Columns ticked in gold, wildflowers peeking through broken marble, olive trees rustling in a slow, ancient breeze. The music that once filled these spaces is gone, yet something lingers. An echo in stone, a memory behind every carved lyre, a story inside every recovered string. This is where our journey meets its gentle ending, the legacy of ancient Greek instruments and the long shadow they cast over centuries of sound. Long after the festival crowds disappeared and city-states fell into dust, the spirit of Greek music endured. Let's explore slowly, imagining how those old tools, lyre, kithara, aulos, drum, panpipe, travelled through time and changed the way the world listened and created. As the Roman Empire rose, Greek instruments crossed borders, merging with the new. Roman musicians adopted the kithara and lyre, renamed them, altered their shapes, tuned them for new modes, and spread their voices into far-off provinces. The aulos, too, travelled west, becoming the tibia, in Latin, featured in gladiatorial games, processions, and theatre. Through trade and conquest, Greek music mingled with that of Egypt, Mesopotamia, Persia, even India. Flutes arrived from the east, drums and cymbals crossed the Mediterranean. Each generation tinkered, refined, borrowed. The soundscape grew bigger, deeper, richer. Christian monks, centuries later, rescued fragments of ancient musical theory, adapting the knowledge of Pythagoras and Aristoxenus to create the first systems of Western musical notation. The philosophy of harmony, balance, and structure that the Greeks prized quietly shaped Gregorian chant, medieval polyphony, and, eventually, the rules that guided Bach and Mozart. In every era since, echoes of Greek music lived on, not just in theory, but in the ways we hope for beauty, order, and transcendence through sound. Instruments themselves evolved, morphing through practice and time. The lyre gave birth to the medieval rote and later the harp. The kithara's bright, projecting voice inspired the Renaissance guitar and, later, the classical guitar's rounded shape. The pan flute survived in rural villages from southern Europe to South America, its breathy song unchanged. The drum, ancient as memory, now fills concert halls and stadiums, a heartbeat that crosses every border. Archaeologists uncover clues: fragments of wood and bone, corroded bronze bells, tiny ivory picks, painted scenes on broken pottery. By piecing these together, modern experts build replicas, tuning and playing them in the same way ancient hands once did, letting new listeners hear what perhaps no one had heard for 2,000 years. The result is never perfect, but it is haunting, moving, a bridge restored across ages. Museums across the world hold silent lyres, battered panpipes, a few precious aulos. Yet these relics are full of potential. When played, they wake up. When displayed, they invite the imagination to wander, to guess at lost harmonies, to sense the hands of people long gone. Composers, historians, and performers still draw inspiration from ancient Greece. New works, quote, old scales, use reconstructed instruments, or weave mythic tales into song cycles, operas, films. Every time a modern hand plucks or breathes or drums as the ancients once did, that world flowers again, if just for a note, a phrase. Even for those who never touch an instrument, the Greek view of music lingers. We talk of harmony in life, the music of spheres, the rhythm of the sea, or the lyric of a voice we love. These are more than metaphors, they are gifts from a civilization that saw no boundary between art and living, sound and soul. If you visit Greece today, you'll hear music everywhere, echoes of folk tunes in the villages, laughter and guitar in the city squares, the hush of string and voice at sunset by the sea. Some artists still try to build lyres from wood and tortoise shell, still string kitharas and polish bone flutes, still teach children to play the songs of the old gods. In schools and homes, in wild olive groves and among old stones, music keeps its promise to comfort, to celebrate, to mark time, to ease sorrow, to join hands across generations. No instrument lasts forever, but their spirit persists. Every plucked string, every breath through bone or reed, every gentle beat on taut skin carries the hope, the effort, and the memory of those who came before. We are always, whether knowingly or not, listening to echoes. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, let those echoes enfold you. Imagine the warmth of sun on marble, the tremble of lyre strings, the hush of a flute at dusk, the slow, patient roll of an ancient drum. Let yourself be part of the unbroken line, holding close the knowledge that music's simple gifts never truly fade, because they live on every time we remember, imagine, or dare to listen. This is how the instruments of ancient Greece, fragile as they were, found immortality, not only in stone, but in every heart that still hopes for beauty when the world grows quiet. Let's drift gently across the blue waters of the Mediterranean, leaving behind the marble columns and olive groves of Greece, and wandering into the golden sands and great temples of ancient Egypt. Tonight, we'll explore how Egyptian musical instruments both inspired and paralleled what we've discovered in Greece, creating a fascinating dialogue of sound across cultures. Picture the banks of the Nile at sunset, where papyrus reeds sway in the evening breeze and temple walls glow with painted scenes of musicians, dancers, and sacred ceremonies. Egypt's musical tradition was ancient, even when Greece was young, stretching back thousands of years before the first Olympic Games, before Homer sang his epics, before Athens became a center of learning and art. Egyptian instruments shared surprising similarities with their Greek cousins, yet each carried the unique spirit of its homeland. The Egyptian harp, for instance, was far more common than in Greece, tall, elegant, sometimes towering over the player's head. Picture musicians in royal courts, their fingers dancing across 20 or 30 strings, creating cascades of sound that filled vast halls with shimmering melody. These harps weren't just instruments, they were works of art. Craftsmen carved them from precious woods, decorated them with gold leaf, ivory inlays, and painted scenes of gods and goddesses. Some were shaped like boats, symbolizing the journey through the afterlife. Others bore the heads of sacred animals, hawks, cats, or ibises, watching over the music with eternal eyes. The sistrum, Egypt's sacred rattle, had no real equivalent in Greece, yet it served a similar purpose to Greek cymbals and clappers, calling attention, marking rhythm, and creating the shimmering soundscape of religious ceremony. Picture priestesses in white linen robes moving through incense-filled temples, their sistrums catching the lamplight as they danced, the metal rings singing with every step and gesture. Egyptian flutes and pipes were everywhere. Reed pipes, much like the Greek aulos, but often single rather than double, and sometimes longer, creating deeper, more haunting tones. Musicians learned to bend notes, to slide between pitches, creating music that seemed to float and weave like the Nile itself. But it was the drums that truly showed Egypt's musical soul. Picture massive drums in temple courtyards, some tall as a person, their skins painted with hieroglyphs and sacred symbols. During festivals, these drums thundered across the desert, calling the faithful from miles away. Smaller drums, portable and personal, accompanied dancers in homes and marketplaces, their rhythms as essential as heartbeat. Egyptian tomb paintings show us scenes that feel familiar to anyone who's imagined Greek musical life. Musicians at banquets, their instruments gleaming in the torchlight, funeral processions with mourners playing soft, sad melodies, children learning to play simple flutes and small harps, workers singing in the fields with rhythm sticks keeping time. Yet there were differences too. Egyptian music was more connected to the afterlife, to the journey of the soul through death and rebirth. Many instruments were buried with their owners, harps to play in the eternal gardens, flutes to sing to the gods, drums to mark the rhythm of eternity. Greek instruments, while sacred, were more focused on the living world, on community, celebration, the here and now. Trade between Egypt and Greece meant constant exchange of musical ideas. Greek merchants returning from Alexandria brought new scales, new rhythms, sometimes even new instruments. Egyptian musicians traveled north, playing in Greek cities, teaching local students, sharing techniques passed down through dynasties. The construction techniques also cross-pollinated. Egyptian woodworkers knew secrets of bending and shaping that Greek craftsmen adopted. Greek string-making skills found their way south, improving the tone and durability of Egyptian harps and lyres. In the Great Library of Alexandria, Greek and Egyptian musical theories merged. Scholars compared scales, studied the mathematics of harmony, documented the healing properties of different sounds. This wasn't just academic exercise, it was practical knowledge used by musicians, doctors, and priests throughout the ancient world. Picture a scene that might have occurred a dozen times, an Egyptian harpist and a Greek lyrist meeting in a tavern near the harbour, sharing wine and songs as the sun sets over the Mediterranean. Neither speaks the other's language fluently, but music bridges the gap. A melody started by one, picked up and embellished by the other, creating something new that belongs to both cultures and neither. Egyptian influence on Greek music was particularly strong in certain scales and modes, those haunting, mysterious sounds that could transport listeners to different emotional states. Some Greek musicians became famous for their Egyptian style, incorporating the sliding pitches and complex rhythms they'd learned from Nilotic masters. The religious connection was powerful too. Both cultures believed music could reach the divine, could heal, could guide souls on their journeys. Egyptian temple music, with its emphasis on repetition and trance, influenced certain Greek mystery cults and healing rituals. Even today, when we listen to reconstructions of ancient music from either culture, we hear the family resemblance, the shared understanding that sound is sacred, that rhythm is life, that melody can carry hopes and prayers across any distance. As the ancient world shifted and changed, as empires rose and fell, these musical traditions intertwined like the currents of the great river and the endless sea, creating something richer and more beautiful than either could have achieved alone. If you'd love to hear more about the musical connections between ancient civilizations, hit like on this video and let me know in the comments. Let's journey westward, gliding past the islands of the Aegean into the heart of Rome itself. Imagine crowded Roman streets, the scent of bread and roasting meats, laughter rising over mosaic floors, music thrumming in the background, its roots reaching all the way back to Greece. Tonight, I'll slowly unveil how the instruments of ancient Greece were adopted, adapted, and transformed by the Romans into something both familiar and completely new. Step into a Roman villa at dusk. The walls echo with gentle strumming. What you hear is the kithara, almost indistinguishable from the Greek kithara, its wood polished, its strings taut, its voice spirited and bright. Romans admired Greek music fiercely. For centuries it was the gold standard of civilized sound. Wealthy families hired Greek musicians to teach their children, preferred Greek compositions at banquets, and competed to own the finest imported instruments. But Rome was a world of spectacle. The simple grace of Greek music wasn't always enough. Instruments grew larger, louder, more theatrical. The kithara became the cithara, now with heavier strings and brighter construction to fill vast banquet halls. Lyres gleamed with ivory and gold status symbols as much as tools, marking social power as clearly as fine clothing or rare wines. The aulos, the haunting double pipe of Greek ritual, arrived in Rome as the tibia. For the Romans, this instrument was first a voice of celebration and then of gladiatorial games, its sharp, urgent pulse driving wild excitement across crowds too large for a simple lyre to reach. Roman musicians experimented with materials and tuning, sometimes creating competing schools of pipe playing, arguing over which style or wood or reed produced the sweetest, most stirring sound. Drums and cymbals, borrowed from Greek festivals and mystery rites, thundered and shimmered in the Roman circus. Picture ancient arenas, wild animals, daring acrobats, crowds roaring, all underscored by relentless percussion, rhythmic patterns designed to excite, frighten, and unite. Percussion in Rome wasn't just music, it was method, control, signal. Trumpets grew longer and sharper. The cornu, shaped like a huge curved horn, provided the beating heart of military life, its call summoning legionaries into line, announcing victory and marking high-emotion moments in the imperial palace. The Greek salpinx lived on, now powering the Roman army's pulse. Even Greek panpipes found their way into Rome. Children played them in country festivals, shepherds played by mountain streams, and sometimes theaters filled with their sweet, pastoral tones. Musicians from Greece became celebrities for a while. To be a Greek artist in Rome was both honor and risk. You could dazzle at great feasts, win the favor of an emperor, or just as easily be dismissed as a novelty. The Roman elite admired Greek charm but wanted their entertainment bigger, flashier, more inventive. Instruments continued to evolve. Greek craftsmen, rewarded for their knowledge, built workshops in Roman towns, sharing secrets of lyre making and aulos construction. Roman artisans learned to carve, string, and tune with Greek precision, but adapted the aesthetics, sometimes making instruments brighter, heavier, more ornate. Technique mingled with fashion. Over time, Roman music traditions fused with Greek ones. Festivals blended styles, old Greek hymns recited alongside Latin songs, drama mixing lyric and percussion, processions featuring instruments from both worlds. In imperial cities, you might recognize a tune from Athens played on a Roman cithara, now layered with added harmony and bolder rhythm. Formal education in Rome often included Greek theory scales, modes, and the philosophical link between music and virtue. But the Romans always preferred a bit more drama, music that could be played outdoors, heard over hundreds of feet, capable of stirring not just contemplation but action. Slaves and freedmen brought new voices too. Musicians from Africa, Asia Minor, and the Levant contributed rhythms and sounds, sometimes playing old Greek tunes on unfamiliar hybrid instruments, weaving the songs into Rome's multicultural tapestry. By the time the Roman Empire stretched from Britain to Egypt, the Greek musical spirit was everywhere, adapted for triumphs, tragedies, seductions, celebrations, sorrow. Greek music, though changed, survived in every villa, marketplace, and temple. Fragments of Roman instruments, found today, usually show signs of Greek craftsmanship, the careful woodwork, the symmetrical design, the attention to detail inherited generation after generation. Ancient writers, Horace, Ovid, Cicero, referenced music's power, echoing Greek ideas about harmony, inspiration, and connection. So as you fall asleep to this story, imagine music as flowing water, starting in the hills of Greece, winding slowly through history and tradition, finally joining the great river of Rome, mixing, changing, and nourishing new worlds without ever truly vanishing. If you want a whole video exploring how Greek music transformed Roman culture and entertainment, leave a comment below and let me know. Tonight, let me gently guide you through a quieter, sometimes erased but deeply resonant side of music history, the world of women musicians in ancient cultures. Whether in Greece, Rome, Egypt, or far beyond, women shaped the soundscape of the ancient world, often from behind closed doors, sacred spaces, or the very edges of official memory. Let's begin in Greece, in the hidden warmth of a home at dusk. Imagine women humming lullabies to sleepy children, their voices rising softly above the clatter of daily life. Some played the lyre, others the simple crotallon, clapper, or sistron rattle, weaving gentle rhythms into laughter or comfort. Their music marked daily rituals, baking bread, spinning wool, tending lamps, preparing for festivals. Most of the music that filled Greek houses, the melodies children remembered when they grew old, were sung by women. In the great festivals dedicated to female deities, Demeter, Artemis, the mysterious Kore women's voices sang together in powerful structured choirs. Imagine lines of young girls, the chorus, practicing their steps in the temple courtyard as dusk falls. Voices blend, feet drum soft patterns on dust, cymbals flash. It was an honor and a rite of passage to be chosen, pride and nervousness mixed, tradition passing quietly from one class to the next. We know that in Sparta, unlike elsewhere, girls received formal music education, a belief that strength, discipline, and harmony profited everyone. Spartan girls sang odes to Artemis in processions, their songs echoing through colonnades, their rhythms marking public games and private prayer. The pride for such roles lasted a lifetime. In myth and legend, women musicians sometimes reached legendary status. Sappho, poet-songwriter of Lesbos, is the brightest star, her melodies and verses enchanting generations, her lyre both instrument and confidant. Surviving fragments of her songs hint at deep emotion, complexity, and tenderness. She founded schools, trained other women, taught poetry and performance as an art of life and feeling. Ritual and religion gave space where civil life did not. Priestesses led processions with music, sometimes playing drums, more often singing and conducting. In Dionysian mysteries, women entered trance or ecstatic celebration with the pounding of tympanons, the shake of rattles. It's here, in the boundary of the sacred, that women's music was power, capable of summoning gods, healing, transforming grief and joy. Move now to Egypt, where temple murals show ranks of women harpists in fine linen singing before the gods or attending great queens in life and in death. Their music was part of daily worship, a constant offering that maintained order and pleased the divine. In some periods of ancient Rome, professional women musicians flourished, though never enjoying perfect freedom. They played lyres, pipes, drums, even performed on theater stages or danced during massive festivals. Some traveled between cities, crossing barriers of class and language, their fame spreading stories as much as song. But there were limits and dangers. In most cultures, women musicians outside sacred or domestic contexts could be judged harshly, sometimes viewed as courtesans, slaves, or transgressors of social order. Freedom to perform in public was rare, acclaim was fleeting and often double-edged. In literature and art, female musicians might be subtly mocked or marginalized. Their contribution, however, was immense. Women passed on folk songs, invented new dances, shaped local festivals, and kept the memory of community alive when wars or sorrow scattered families. Their music marked births, weddings, deaths, the bookends and the chapters of life. Generations remembered songs not from grand theatres but from mother to daughter, aunt to niece, friend to friend, sung in kitchens or over cradles in the deep of night. Artifacts tell their own stories, decorated rattles with women's faces, odes carved in tiny script, jewellery found with small pipes and clappers, celebrating playing as a joy rather than duty. Even in societies that limited women's public music, their instruments and songs endured, transformed but remembered in folk melody, nursery rhyme, old ritual. The further you travel across time and space, the more you realize music's deepest magic was never merely a performance, but a way of belonging, of comforting, healing, hoping, and remembering. At bedsides, firesides, temples, and festivals, women's music was heartbeat and anchor. So before we move on, if hearing the tales of ancient women musicians made you curious, maybe subscribe to my channel one day. I could dedicate an entire journey just to their stories, songs, and survival. Imagine setting out at dawn from the shores of the Aegean, following the ancient trade routes that would one day be called the Silk Road, travelling east through Anatolia, Persia, over mountains and desert, into Central Asia and beyond. The path is difficult, the scenery ever-changing, but at every step you hear the faint sound of music drifting in from the world's crossroads. Let's wander slowly through that world. Merchants carry spices, cloth, and stories, but tucked away in nomad satchels and caravan boxes are musical instruments, tools of joy, comfort, worship, and wonder. The lyre, kithara, panpipe, drum, and cymbals travel with traders, diplomats, wanderers, and warriors, crossing languages, religions, and climates. At bustling market towns along the way, you'd encounter sound from every corner of the world. The delicately curved Greek kithara meets its cousin, the Persian barbat, a round-bodied lute with silk strings and a deep, contemplative voice. The panpipe is mirrored in Chinese pekshao, a wooden array of reeds, and in Central Asian flutes built from river reeds toughened by wind and sand. Drums and cymbals carried in camel saddlebags join the sounds of bronze gongs and hand drums from India and Egypt. Each culture adapts and transforms. Greeks borrow new rhythms, Persians carve new tuning pegs, Chinese artisans blend Greek scales with pentatonic melodies. In every oasis, musicians gather, sometimes struggling to communicate, sometimes bursting into laughter at the way a shared rhythm can say what words cannot. There are moments of fusion, a Greek lyre strummed with Persian harmonies, a panpipe solo mixed with Indian dance rhythms, a Turkish reed flute whispering a tune first sung in Egypt. Over generations, these moments become new traditions, echoes of home joined with adventure, trade, and innovation. Sometimes, musicians are themselves travelers, entertainers who work their way from city to city, learning songs from every place, adapting old stories into new contexts. They carry tools not just for music, but for healing, ritual, celebration, and even diplomacy. The right song at a feast can smooth a deal more surely than a clever speech. Instruments change physically too. The dry air of Iran demands new glues and woods. The lush valleys of India favor bamboo, coconut, and gourd. Makers exchange secrets in market stalls, how to shape holes for clearer sound, how to stretch hide for a resonant drum, how to bind reeds for longevity. Each exchange leaves a mark. Someday, centuries later, you can see the mingling of traditions in antique harps and flutes, in painted pottery, in written music theory. Even as armies cross borders and empires rise and fall, music refuses to be confined. Lyres might disappear from Greek cities for a time, but reappear in Byzantine courts, blended with influences from the steppes and deserts. The panpipe's breath dances from Europe to Africa to Asia, never quite the same, always familiar. Musical stories pass along with the instruments. Tales of Orpheus mingle with legends of Shirin and Farhad, with Indian epics sung to slow drum beats, with Chinese histories moulded into plucked melodies. Festivals celebrate the diversity, and old songs are kept alive not just for tradition, but for the comfort and thrill of rediscovery. Sometimes, along these routes, musicians must adapt to new beliefs. The music of one place is sacred in another, forbidden elsewhere, celebrated somewhere else. Instruments become symbols, signs of openness, curiosity, and the persistent, gentle promise that beauty survives in every culture, every crossing, every uncertain night. So, as night falls on our journey and the roads stretch ahead into darkness, let's remember that music, more than any treasure or invention, was the world's first shared language, and the instruments we've explored tonight are the vessels that carry its message across every distance, difference, and age. Thank you for joining me in this long and gentle exploration. If you'd enjoy more journeys through the secret history of instruments and music, leave a like. But above all, I wish you a peaceful night, a comforting drift into dreams, and the soft assurance that music's echo is always there, holding us close. Good night.